Have you thought setting in a two-piece sleeve on a denim jacket was difficult? Well, let's break down that myth and make it easy for you. Keep watching. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina. This is Lifting Pins and Needles, a channel all about sewing, limitless sewing. Welcome back to my channel if you are regularly viewing all this content, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. You will find a myriad of sewing options here, from pattern drafting, hacking, indie patterns, big four patterns, all sorts. For you who are new to the channel and don't know where I am in Brazil. It is hot, it is windy, it is humid. And if you can see there, it's gonna be about 35-36 degrees this afternoon, and I'm trying to film this outside sort of early-ish before that heat starts, because then I can't even move. Enough about that. If you're enjoying the frequent content I am uploading all about sewing, please subscribe. Join this community, tap on the bell so you get notified when I upload a video full of sewing tips and tricks that can help your sewing. Last week I showed you two denim jackets I made as a pattern tester for each to stitch, the Atenas Jacket. And this video was a collaboration with Whitney from Tomcat Stitchery. If you still haven't seen that video, go ahead and look at that video, because you might not understand what I'm talking about. I'm inserting a few images here so you can see. Two versions, the workhorse made out of denim, and then the special super nice flowery one made out of home furnishing fabric that sort of is the same weight and behaves like denim. So I have these two, I love them, they are super special. I have worn this one out already to church and felt amazing in it. I'll pop a picture here so you can see. And in the video about this, I promised that I would show you a different video about the construction of the two-piece sleeve. If you can see there is a seam at the back that has been top stitched. There is a functional vent on the sleeve. There is a cuff. There's lots of details to this sleeve. It's not just your typical sleeve, but actually it's not that hard. And I have filmed the whole process of how to do this. And bonus, please watch until the end, because I have another surprise for you, and that's why I have named this video how to set in sleeves or not. If you know me, you might guess what I'm talking about. But yeah, let's hop into how to do this fabulous sleeve. I filmed the whole process on my yellow muslin, so hopefully you can see everything clearly how it's done there.
Don't you think this is start to
The sleeves for this jacket have two pieces, so that is amazing. There's always going to be great shaping on your elbow with that seam there. I have already pinned it together to get it ready to sew. So here, there's actually different notches here, because on this seam, there is going to be an opening where you will have a little slit. So that's why these two have sort of different lengths here. One is wider than the other for the technique that's going to be used there. There's a notch there to match the notch on the other side. Another one here to match the notch there. And this is going to match your front armscye, just a single notch on the top, and your double notch as usual. This is the seam that you usually do first. You usually finish that however you're going to do it, flat felled or fake flat felled, and then do top stitching, and then you sew this other one together so that that's all done for when you have to set your sleeve into your jacket. That has already been top stitched. That would be super hard to do if you didn't do it beforehand. Because I'm only doing one sleeve for my muslin, I just cut out one cuff. I think it's important for me to do this so that I can assess the actual finished length of the sleeve, which is hard to just guess if it's gonna hit your wrist or above or not, if you're trying to guess how much longer you're gonna have with the cuff added on. So I just decided to actually cut a cuff for my muslin to see the proper length. I have a sneaky suspicion I'm gonna need to add length to the sleeves because I have pretty long limbs, but I won't know for sure until I sew it. I have sewn the seam of the sleeves there. That has been trued, so that is why there's that little shape. This seam is stitched with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and this is where that little slit is gonna happen. So there is a little mark there, and you need to stitch up to there basically. That's why you see me go back. So that's with your normal stitch length. Now from there to the bottom, it's basting stitches. So I've done a big long stitch. There is a notch there that matches a notch on the other side. So you just, no back tacking or anything, just baste down to the bottom, leave some long threads, you can remove it later. And then you have to cut there to the stitch line, but not through it. And then you finish the seam, however you're finishing it. I'm not finishing it for the muslin. And now you need to top stitch this. Remember I talked about this happening, the top stitching of this sleeve part happens before you actually assemble the full sleeve. So this seam is going to be pressed towards the larger piece. You know, this is the larger piece and the smaller piece of the sleeve. You press the seam that way and then you top stitch there. After that is where all the vent business comes from, where the basting stitch is right there. But I'm going to top stitch first. Here is the wrong side of the sleeve. That's the seam. That inner one there is the top stitching that I've done on the other side. And you can see that that top stitch just reaches up to there, not goes through this clipped area where the basting is. So now the basting needs to be removed. So I'm going to show you how the vent goes. The big sleeve piece here is the upper sleeve, so I've just written upper there, and the smaller one, you know, is called the undersleeve. And we have pressed the seam towards upper sleeve. It has been top stitched up to there where the mark was and where I did the cut up to the stitch line. I have removed the basting stitch that was there, and so the seam allowance on the upper sleeve is smaller than the seam allowance on the undersleeve, and this is drafted like that. So what you have to do with this seam allowance of the upper sleeve is just fold it in like that, and then top stitch that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Where that stitch is there, it's just going to look like one continuous stitch towards the bottom there. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep this one out of the way. So it just looks like one continuous stitch all the way down. Okay, so that has been finished there. It could be better, but you know, this is just a muslin. Now this one is wider, and now this one needs to overlap over here. You can see where my basting was, so that should reach there. See, it should reach there. And now what you have to do here is fold it once and then fold it again so that you have a really clean finish inside there. And you can see that there's an overlap up there. And now that needs to be sewn there, and that is going to close off this bit there. And you got to be really careful to not catch anything up there. On my actual jean jacket, I'm going to be super precise with this, like super precise, because I want this little vent to be super perfect. I'm going to help myself with a few pins there, and now I have to sew from there and finish this seam. Okay, so here you can see the little slit or the little vent is done. Now remember, this has been serged or flat felled or anything. This is just a muslin, that's why I have raw areas there, but it's going to look nicer with the definite one. But now on this side right here, you have to do like a little tack right there. I just do that with a really tiny zigzag on my sewing machine, and I'll be doing that with the final versions of the jacket with the denim. 1.5 and 0.8 stitch length. I think I could up that up to 1 and it'll still be really, really nice. It went a bit wonky, you know, but again, this is a muslin and I'm just trying to internalize the process here. When I finally make this jacket, because I'm already doing everything so detailed on this muslin, it'll be super easy. I've gone ahead and done the other seam. This is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once this has been sewn, you press it towards the upper sleeve. That's why I've put a pin there to mark that, so I don't forget. Now comes the cuff. Now there is a piece for the cuff. This of course needs to be interfaced with your denim, your final fashion fabric. I'm not interfacing a muslin. Now one of these sides you need to do a guide stitch. I've done that. You can see that with green at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then just I finger press that up. This cuff will be sewn around there with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and from these little areas here there's going to be 1/2 inch protruding on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it around. So I've pinned the cuff there. These are right sides together here. The foldy bit is in on the wrong side, and now you can see that protruding 1/2 inch there, and it's protruding 1/2 inch there. Everything matches perfect, and I just have to do that stitch there now. The cuff has been sewn on. As you can see, these seam allowances need to go down. So what I've done to the other side and pin it already there is bring this cuff up, meet with that seam right there. Remember, the seams are pressed down, and you meet these there. I've just put 2 pins there, and now from the edge there of the vent you're going to sew this thing closed, this one, and the same thing over here. I just haven't pinned it yet. Need to put 2 pins there so I can sew there. I'm going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. See how the stitching goes right next to it but not touching it, you know. So both of these have been closed, and now turning this to the right side, I'm just going to fold that there and flip it. And now this is all flapping around and raw in there. Remember, the seam allowances from the cuff there have to go down. So this is now where you have to meet this here, pin it or hand baste it, and then top stitch all the way around the cuff. This has been pinned. You can see on the inside it's very neat to match the seam there. And now with my edge foot, I'm gonna sew this down with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that'll be the full rectangle up to there, pivoting there on the bottom, pivoting here up, and then there. So this little slit overlaps, so you have your buttonhole there and your button there. I started the top stitching on the bottom of the cuff there, and then pivoted there, and now I'm on the actual seam there where the sleeve is to the cuff, and I'm just pulling out the pins as I go. The edge of there goes into the seam, and it gives you a really neat finish.
What can I do? Time flashed by and I woke up on the other side of the moon. The sun.
I have a completed sleeve. Everything's done. The vent, the cuff, everything's really neat with my green top stitching, so you could see this. So this is just ready to then sew from there, from the double notch to the notch, well, sort of around there. Do your long stitch, and then you need to gather this slightly to set it into the jacket. I'm going to sew this with a 5/8 seam allowance, so I have my sleeve under there. I used to sew this the other way around, but I've converted to this method over a year ago now.
What can I do? Time flashed by and I woke up on the other side of the moon. The sun don't rise, all the light is gone from me and you.
This is the back yoke that I'm gonna sew over that seam. Seam has been pressed up.
To where I'll be. You've been raining down like hail. I'm weak.
I'm always controlling the fabric and checking and touching that I don't get puckers at the bottom, so it takes a while. This is the front yoke there. It's been pressed up as well. It's the front notch there, the single notch. I'm almost done. I hope that was helpful and will help you set in a sleeve. As I showed you the process of sewing the sleeve, this is how I put my sleeve onto the machine, right? So the sleeve is underneath and the jacket is on top. And I'm a convert. I'm probably 18 months now that I've been doing it that way and have found it so much easier, because the slight gathering that you get there with your gathering stitches for the cap, they get eased in really well with the help of the feed dogs. Now, when I found out about this new technique, I thought that's ridiculous. How am I going to control the gathers? Well, it just works. Believe me. And I've got no puckers, nothing inside there. Now, the way I used to do it before was put the sleeve in the same, but pin it here and then put the machine there and have the sleeve up on top. And I used to think that was better because I could see the slight gathers and control them on the top, when actually that way gave me more puckers and more headaches, and it took me a longer time, actually some unstitching to do, and yeah. So give it a go. Put your sleeve in there. You get your sleeve, you put it in there, you match the notches. They've been erased because, you know, friction pens. There's a notch on the top of the sleeve that matches the shoulder seam. You pin from the outside, from the jacket view, slide it in and sew it like you saw me do it there. In real time, setting in a sleeve took me 3 minutes just because I was being extra careful, always touching underneath and seeing that I wasn't going to get any puckers. And it took no time at all. I mean, 6 minutes in the grand scheme of sewing a jacket that took me like 7 hours to make is not much. Okay, so if you know me, you know I like to make things sleeveless. And why would this be an exception? Why? Especially when I remember I have this amazing fabric in my stash. This is also a treasure I found in the street markets in Bolivia a few years ago. Tiny amount of fabric, and I'm going to show you that fabric. You can see it here on my cutting table. It's flowery. It's also a home decor fabric. And I have only, 34 inches. If I flip that around to metric, it's like 85 centimeters. So slightly less than a yard of fabric. There is a brand there I'm not aware of, but just look at the print. It is like a denim. It's like a denim. It's very similar in the weight and feel to this. But actually, what can you do with a yard? A sleeveless one, of course. And there are ways to get around that. So I'm going to show you now a clip of how this one came to be with a yard. I'm going to show you the layout, how I place the pieces, how I fit it onto myself to adapt the armscye to sleeveless. The original jacket is for sleeves, right? And originally has a slight drop shoulder. That might not be just, you know, just make it and that's it. It's not going to fit the armscye well. If you want it sleeveless, you need to do some adaptations to it. And I've put the jacket on, shown you it on myself, because I think that's really helpful for you to see what you have to do with your body. If you decide to convert a blazer, a jacket, anything into sleeveless, this will be handy. So let's go and have a look.
Don't you think this is starting to wear me? You've been raining down like hell. I'm weak.
Bit narrower than the original. That was like that, a bit more wide, but it fits the same. Now here I have excess because of course there's supposed to be sleeves here. So I've just got this pinned and I'm just gonna move in a pin until it's like nice and closed. Now up here on the top, you know, there's sleeve and this is a slightly drop shoulder, but because this is sleeveless, I wanted to like finish a little bit inside my bone. Like there's my bra strap right there, and I wanted to cover that, so let's just say there. When I put these pins, I'm considering I'm gonna lose 1/4 inch here on the width, because that's how much I'm gonna use to put bias binding. So this is just a reference so that I know how much to trim off. Now I do want it nice and closed under there, so mainly the change of shape will be there, and then just get onto that curve right there. When I trim this off, I'm gonna try again, because I have these seams there, the yokes, front and back. And I want to make sure that there's no gaping, and if there is a little bit, I'm just gonna bring in that seam a few millimeters there, a few millimeters there, and I can see there's a bit excess at the back that I might fix with that seam right here. And that's why I haven't top stitched these yokes yet. This one, or that one, they've just been sewn and pressed up, but no top stitching yet. Here you can see where I put my pins for reference, like trying it on, that one, that one, that one. Now that was just a reference, right? But I want to do this with a nice curve. So I've got this ruler that has an armscye curve there, a big one and a smaller one. So what I did was just place it there and found a curve that sort of matched what I wanted. So there is that curve there, and then I went ahead with my friction pen and just drew it. So now when I take out the pins, I have a proper curve that makes sense. I'm sure you can see it. It goes there. Maybe at the back I'll make it less pronounced as is at the front. Here on the side seam, you can see I've put the pin inwards to get rid of all that excess I had there. And the curve that comes from here is going to match the same sort of coverage I have there. So here's the front. I've just trimmed that excess there. And with that one placed there, I have drawn a line at the back there that just matches this curve. But what I'm going to do is just bring it out from the shoulder. It's going to be the same, but from there, I'm just going to bring it out a little bit out, just to have a bit more coverage on the back there. And then it matches that curve there. I hope you can see my red friction pen right there. So then I trim out this bit there. Look, my pins are magnetic. This is just eyeballing. Okay, there you can see that the back armscye is a little bit wider here than the front one. Just about, 1/4 inch. And now this little thing, I'm gonna go and pin it onto the other side and then just trim the same amount off. Okay, here you can see the other armscye, the original one. I've pinned the thingy I cut off from the other one right there. It matches the front yoke, it matches the shoulder seam, it matches the back yoke there. And now I'm just gonna use this as a reference, and I'm just gonna cut right there. And then both my armscye are gonna have the same shape and everything, and I won't have like asymmetric armholes. This is the way I adapt to sleeveless. Anything I do, like a blouse, a top, anything that I change one armscye, this is how I transfer it to the other. So now I have two excess rubbish pieces that are identical, and now this side is going to be the same as this side. Okay, I've trimmed the excess there out of the armscye. I'm quite happy with how it's looking. Now I'm going to lose a little bit of width there, just a little bit for the bias binding, not much. I have pinned quite a lot into that side seam there. You can see the shape there. And even though I've done that, I've still got plenty of ease at the bust. You can see I've got a pin to close the jacket there at the fullest of my bust, and nothing's tight or anything. It's just closing up this armhole, Now at the back, there's a little bit of excess there, and I'm gonna close this little seam there, maybe 1/8 of an inch on the back yoke. And I'll probably do the same here on the shoulder seam. So from the half of the seam, I'm just going to taper in slightly, and same there. It won't be noticeable, but then my armscye is going to be really nice and close, and there's not going to be like what you're seeing, excess space there. So yeah, super happy. Just gonna do those tweaks, fix that there, finish the top stitching, and then I can go ahead and put on the collar, finish the bias binding here. So if you thought that that flowery denim jacket was like the best thing I'd ever made, well, I sort of was, you know, thinking it was the best thing I'd ever made, but this is up there with it. Look at this. I really hope the camera captures the beauty of this. You know, the print was all crazy. You saw there were flowers everywhere. I had minimal fabric, so I wasn't going to be doing any special pattern placement to avoid certain areas. I just put the pieces there, as you saw, closed my eyes, cut them with my rotary cutter, and just hoped for the best. And luckily, I don't have any weird things around my apex. There are the bust pockets. This is the same as the other jacket. All the details are the same, the top stitching, the collar. You saw I had to do this a little bit narrower than the original version to avoid having the selvage pop up there. But it's not much, and it doesn't really affect anything other than that it's a bit narrower there where it's folded and top stitched, you know. This one has no band at the bottom because there was no fabric for the band. So bias binding, my friends. I made some. My husband ripped one of his really nice shirts the other day. Very nice cotton, like beautiful fabric. And yeah, I made yards and yards of bias tape. And I actually used part of that shirt to line my dad's quadra jeans. Yeah, very, very useful when our men rip up their good quality stuff, because that fabric can be really good use for a lot of things. Because this jacket is shaped, it's not a rectangle at the bottom. So I always think that a slightly curved hem works much better with bias binding. You can see it up close. It's been understitched and then folded up and then top stitched. On the top, 5/8 hem allowance is what the bias tape gives me. And I've done the same for the sleeveless armhole. Same thing. Looks really nice on the outside. You know, this can take all the top stitching you want. So I'm not gonna go and like hand hem or like sew the bias binding down by hand when there's like top stitching galore all over the jacket. I'm turning it inside out so you can see. The same as my other versions, I had issues in this seam here that unites the yoke from all the layers that the pocket flap has in there. So I had to hand crank around there. It's not that neat, but you know, it's acceptable. So that happens there. It's just a really nice clean finish inside with my serger at the back. See the bias binding. And this is the undercollar that you're seeing here. Super cool. I love this. You don't know how much I love this. Here I'm outside prancing around in my sleeveless Atenas jacket. You can see the length without the band is still appropriate for me. I like that length. I didn't make any adjustments. The fit is perfect with the C cup. I already knew the fit and I always like sleeveless, so no surprise. Let's speed up the unbuttoning. It's got one button less than the other ones because of the lack of the band. You can see the fit there is amazing if you have it open as well. Just the right amount of ease. Up close, you can see some details of the collar, the band, and it's just a really nice jacket. The same pocket flap for the fake pocket I don't put in there. I didn't put the welt either. And buttonholes. Here is my sleeveless armhole that fits really well with those adaptations. Peep of the bias binding inside. Looks really neat. And yeah, I'm so happy with this. It's just the best thing. And now I have to build up solids to go with this. There is my bias binding hem, and I'm just excited to have such a lovely piece. I'm just so excited to have such a flowery, feminine, springy, although this spring feels like summer, like full on summer in my wardrobe. I'm excited to build some solid pieces to go around this. I styled this with green, which is what I found in my wardrobe at this time, but this can go with denim skirts. I want to make cami tops in the colors of this jacket so that I can have more things to go with. But yeah, I can't even with this one.
What can I do? Time flashed by and I woke up on the other side of the moon. The sun don't rise, all the light is gone.
So there you go, my friends. I delivered. I showed you how to set in sleeves or not, whatever option you like. I'm sure I'm not the only one that likes sleeveless things. You know, if you want to make a sleeveless vest, you can wear turtlenecks and all sorts of things underneath for cooler weather. You know, if you're the type that just needs warmth around your like chest and back and not really your arms. So have a go, make it sleeveless. Today is the last day that this jacket pattern is 20% off. If you've been thinking about it and haven't made up your mind, you might as well get it today, because then, you know, the price goes up higher, you know. Totally worth it, totally worth the pattern. I've made 3. I have not finished with this. I'm thinking suede, I'm thinking wool. I mean, endless possibilities with this pattern. As a gift, I would love to sew these for my family, like totally, yeah. So because I have the construction down memorized with so many of them now, I don't even think, I just sew, and that is really fun. Have a look at more videos here on the channel all about sewing. You will be entertained and also grab practical tips for your own sewing. See you soon. Bye.